What happens when a moment at a sporting event becomes part of a much bigger conversation about politics, media, and public perception? In today's discussion, James O'Brien reflects on reports surrounding Donald Trump's appearance at the NBA Finals and uses that moment to explore a broader question. Who gets to shape the public understanding of events, and what role does journalism play in that process? This isn't really just about basketball, and it's not even just about Donald Trump. It's about competing narratives, public trust, and the importance of independent reporting in democratic societies. James also draws connections to wider debates about misinformation, political messaging, and how events can be interpreted very differently depending on who's telling the story. As you listen, pay attention to the distinction being made between reporting what happened and promoting a particular version of events. Do you think journalism is more important now than ever, or do you believe the public has enough tools to sort fact from fiction on its own? Leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more political commentary and analysis. Let's watch the clip together, and I'll give you my thoughts at the end.
That little quote there in Matt's news bulletin, nailing the point I was trying to make an hour and a half ago about these hideous scenes reaching us from Belfast. Northern Ireland knows better than anywhere the dangers of trying to blame an entire community or an entire group of people for the actions of an individual. But as I predicted would happen, it's happening anyway. Attempts to turn the hideous actions of one individual into some wider, broader point about everybody with the same skin colour or everybody with the same country of origin are well underway and gathering pace. I would just briefly remind you that when Sarah Everard was murdered by a white serving police officer, Nigel Farage insisted that you shouldn't blame men or police officers. I think I'll say that again. When Sarah Everard was murdered by a white serving police officer, Nigel Farage insisted that you shouldn't blame all men, or indeed all police shouldn't make any conclusions about anybody except the person that did it. And he was right on that occasion, albeit it subsequently emerged that her killer's misogyny was fairly well documented and recognised by colleagues who perhaps could have done something about it. But just try and think of humanity as a homogenous force. And when a human is killed, in any circumstances, it's a tragedy. And the person responsible is the killer. So it's an increasingly unfashionable position to adopt. But for the millionth time in the last few years, no pleasure whatsoever in seeing one's predictions entirely come true. 12:34 is the time. A couple of things to play to you, including the reception that Donald Trump received when he turned up for a basketball game at the overnight, and indeed a brilliant, powerful, I don't know what you want to call it, intervention from the journalist that I was telling you about, Scott Pelley, who has been fired from 60 Minutes and subsequently claimed that he wasn't, or that he was being told to inject bias into news reports. What's mad about that is CBS is owned by one of the Ellisons, and when Donald Trump was abusing that female journalist a couple of days ago, he included CBS in the list of things that are fake news. So even when you're sacking journalists essentially for refusing to be biased, you're still going to get it in the neck from Donald Trump, because until it is a bit like 1940s Germany, not 1930s Germany, until every media outlet, until it's like North Korea, and it is, you're just simply not allowed to question him, never mind criticising him, then you're going to have problems. So I'll play it to you in this order. Here is Donald Trump talking about Scott Pelley.
I think Scott Pelley's got his own problems. He's terrible. Look, Scott Pelley's a stiff, and he's afraid. And he's part of this, gang of crooked, stupid people that don't care about our country.
And here is Scott Pelley talking, among other things, about Donald Trump.
I've never worn the uniform, but I've been in combat for this country in Afghanistan and Iraq, Kuwait, been shot at. Spent nights in foxholes filling up with water in the desert. I'm not aware that the President of the United States has ever done any of those things for his country? Please correct me if I'm wrong. You become a journalist because you love the First Amendment. You become a journalist because you love the country. And while all the other descriptions that the President used about me might be applicable, not that one. There is no democracy without journalism. It can't be done. And that is why I am a journalist.
That, I think, will stand the test of time, that testimony from Scott Pelley talking there to Lulu Garcia-Navarro of the New York Times about not the end of his own career, which is, well, his career isn't over, but his time at 60 Minutes is for the foreseeable future, but talking about the death of democracy. It's a favourite subject of mine. You can't make informed opinions without information. You can't make informed opinions without proper journalism. Look at the way lies took hold last week about Henry Novak's hideous murder and this ludicrous notion of anti-white prejudice in the police. And the people who enforce that aren't journalists. I don't know what they are. Stenographers, propagandists. The journalists will tell you what the judge said. The journalists will tell you what the family said. The journalists will tell you what the prosecuting lawyer said in court. The journalists will tell you what the pathologist said. I don't know what word to use to describe the people that will tell you things other than that, who will amplify the words of Nigel Farage instead of the words of the trial judge, but they're not journalists. They're not journalists. Scott Pelley is a journalist, and I'm going to play that again, actually, because I really think that we all need to be reminded sometimes of what the job of a journalist actually is. Harder to forget in this country in recent years than in the United States of America, I think, because how many times have I used the word client journalist? I'm afraid that I realise now, listening to Scott Pelley, one of those words is redundant. That's why my father became a journalist, my late father. I'd like to say that it's why I became one, but I think that would be both pompous and self-serving. I don't think I did. I think I became a journalist because I thought it would be a really cool life, a really cool job. But I listen to people like Scott Pelley today, and I'm very, very glad that I did.
I've never worn the uniform, but I've been in combat for this country, in Afghanistan and Iraq, Kuwait, been shot at, spent nights in foxholes filling up with water in the desert. I'm not aware that the President of the United States has ever done any of those things for his country. Please correct me if I'm wrong. You become a journalist because you love the First Amendment. You become a journalist because you love the country. And while all the other descriptions that the President used about me might be applicable, not that one. There is no democracy without journalism. It can't be done. And that is why I am a journalist.
It's 20 to 1. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Let me give you an example of what Scott Pelley is talking about. Okay, here is a brief clip of events at Madison Square Gardens for a very important basketball game. And here is a clip of the crowd greeting the president. And here's how it gets described by the president in a world where the journalists have been silenced, have been removed, have gone to the place that Scott Pelley was alluding to. You just heard rafter rattling booing in Madison Square Gardens. And this is the official version of events that without journalists would go unchallenged.
I thought it was amazing, actually. You mean when they had the camera on me? I thought it was very good, yeah. It was certainly amazing. It was. I think mostly cheers. It was loud and it was very enthusiastic.
So that's what he's talking about. I had those clips prepared for you. I hadn't realised they were related, actually, because you talk about North Korea or you talk about 1940s Germany, 1930s Germany. That's what happens when you don't have journalism, and that Donald Trump can be booed to the rafters, and the next day's papers will say that he was cheered. I think I can't remember which paper it was, but when he stormed out of an interview the other day and inappropriately touched the female journalist on the way out, it gets written up somewhere as the events that happened in the interview, rather than he stormed out when he was asked to provide evidence of election fraud. He stormed out when he was asked to provide evidence of election fraud, because there isn't any. I played you that clip yesterday. But that's what Scott Pelley is talking about. An entire stadium of people can boo a man to the rafters, but the official version of events, in the absence of journalism, is that he was cheered to the high heavens. An election can unfold in entirely ordinary and normal ways, but in the absence of decent journalism, the man who lost can lie about it being rigged and stolen, and it will become the official narrative. It will become the official version of events. A mob of violent people with blood on their minds and the name of a vice president on their lips can march upon the Capitol at the behest of that man who lost that election. And they can strike terror into the guardians of democracy who both work there as politicians and work there as protectors of politicians. And they can leave people dead in their wake. But without proper journalists, that gets described as an act of patriotism, and the criminals responsible for it get pardoned because the liar is in charge, which means the lies have become the official version of events.
Here's the key question. Can a democracy function properly if citizens no longer agree on basic facts? That seems to be the central issue James O'Brien was highlighting throughout this discussion. While the conversation began with reactions to Donald Trump's appearance at the NBA Finals, it quickly expanded into something much larger: the relationship between journalism, political power, and public understanding. One of the strongest arguments presented was the idea that journalism serves as a bridge between events and the public. The discussion emphasized that when reporters gather evidence, verify claims, and provide context, citizens are better equipped to form their own opinions. The concern raised was what happens when that process is weakened or replaced by partisan narratives, social media amplification, or political messaging. Another notable point was the contrast between first-hand events and competing descriptions of those events. The discussion wasn't simply about whether people cheered or booed at a sporting event. It was about how different audiences can receive completely different interpretations of the same moment, depending on the sources they trust. The comments regarding Scott Pelley were also significant because they focused on the purpose of journalism itself, whether viewers agree with every opinion expressed or not. The broader argument was that a functioning democracy depends upon access to reliable information and independent reporting. At the same time, viewers may have different perspectives on where the line exists between journalism, commentary, activism, and opinion. That's a debate that continues not only in the United States but across many democratic societies. The wider significance of this discussion goes beyond any individual politician. Trust in institutions, confidence in the media, and the ability to distinguish verified information from political narratives are issues that affect everyone, regardless of party affiliation. So, what do you think? Is journalism becoming more important in today's political environment? Or do alternative sources of information provide enough balance? And how should citizens navigate competing claims about the same event? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because this is one of the defining debates of our time. Did you enjoy this video? If so, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Your support helps us continue bringing you in-depth analysis and thoughtful discussion. The takeaway is simple. Democracy depends not just on the freedom to speak, but also on the ability to know what actually happened.